He summoned her to publicly shame her before his affluent guests. However, when she placed her hands on the piano, the room became utterly silent. Savannah heat operates without fairness in July. The air was dense and heavy, clinging to skin and making clothing feel burdensome. Beverly Gaines stood near the wrought iron gate of 742 Prospect Lane, a canvas bag slung over one shoulder and a subtle moment of uncertainty in her chest. It wasn't fear, it wasn't anxiety, just a brief pause. A moment of stillness before entering another person's space. She hadn't anticipated employment in a residence of that nature. Not at this point in her life. 48 years old, no children, no husband. Just a one-bedroom apartment near Chatham Square and a voice that still occasionally sang in her sleep. But when her job at the dry cleaners closed unexpectedly, Beverly understood the urgency. Rent, it wouldn't wait. Upon the agency's call inquiring about her availability for a private client cleaning, she immediately accepted before they completed their request. The Whitlow estate embodied the expected grandeur of established Southern wealth. White columns, a wraparound porch, and boxwood hedges meticulously trimmed. It was a place of such refinement that even the birds seemed to move with a subdued grace. She proceeded up the steps, rang the bell, and the door opened with almost immediate responsiveness. "You're punctual," the house manager stated, looking at her clipboard without offering a smile. That was already an improvement over the previous employee. Beverly didn't take it as a slight. She rarely did. It was necessary if you wanted to retain employment in another person's home. You smile, you nod, you blend into the surroundings. The initial weeks passed without incident. She cleaned tile, shined silver, and discovered the location of every control and concealed item. She avoided drawing attention to herself, responding only when addressed, and always using sir or mom. Mr. Whitlow paid her little regard, preoccupied with entertaining lawyers, business associates, or women in high heels, all of whom departed before breakfast. Her presence wasn't meant to be acknowledged. However, one afternoon, while dusting the second-floor hallway, she stopped near the music room. The room was unoccupied, but the grand piano stood prominently, like a centerpiece in a deserted banquet hall. An itch in her hand, akin to muscle memory, prompted her movement. She entered, closing the door softly, and settled down briefly. The keys felt smooth, not new, but carefully maintained. She played a single note, then another, and a recognizable tune emerged, a childhood melody, her mother's preferred gospel hymn. Just a few measures were played, gentle and slow. She didn't notice the approaching footsteps until the final note faded. "You're aware that task isn't included in your duties, correct?" Beverly abruptly stood, as if discovered in wrongdoing. Mr. Whitlow rested against the doorframe, holding a wine glass and smiling knowingly. He was a man who rarely posed a question without already possessing the answer. "I'm sorry, sir, I didn't mean you play." He interjected. She glanced downward slightly. "When I was young." He tilted his head, as if she'd made a comical remark. Who would have thought? And then he departed. Beverly made no further reference to the incident, deciding she had likely tested her fortune. She was unaware that that instance had already initiated something within his thoughts, something he would utilize subsequently, not to commend her, but to exhibit her. Charles Whitlow never needed to strive for charm. He carried it as a second skin, polished, rehearsed, and just artificial enough to be hazardous. At 56, he appeared precisely the Southern gentleman he feigned to be. Linen suits during the summer, costly shoes designed for standing, not walking. His smile could market falsehoods without hesitation. Beneath the outward appearance of success, a sense of decay existed that primarily concerned the staff. To the public, he presented himself as a philanthropist, organizing fundraisers for the arts, contributing to schools, and hosting annual garden parties that garnered attention in the society pages. He engaged in public appearances, shaking hands with judges and interacting with people at political events, creating the impression of a political aspiration, despite never explicitly stating his intentions. Within the house, however, Charles maintained control through ridicule. The assistance was readily available, and he valued wielding it to discomfort others. Beverly recognized this tendency from the start. He rarely shouted or raised his voice, yet possessed a remarkable ability to diminish people's sense of self without physical contact. For instance, he once inquired of the new chef if his sophisticated California training encompassed the ability to prepare acceptable grits while serving 20 guests. On another occasion, he observed a gardener stooping to retrieve a dropped rose and remarked, "Careful now, could send you back to minimum wage." No one challenged him. No one offered a correction. He was Charles Whitlow. In this town, his reputation commanded respect. Even the legal authorities didn't always question his pronouncements. Beverly attempted to avoid him, but that wasn't always feasible. He began to probe her. Initially, these were minor comments. "Gaines," he stated one morning while preparing breakfast. "Have you ever worn anything other than beige?" Later, while enjoying bourbon on the porch, "You seem very quiet. Do you ever speak, or do you simply move about like a phantom?" She did not respond to his attempt at conversation. She continued working. Then one evening, as she walked through the foyer carrying polished silver, he spoke to her. "Are you still playing those piano keys when no one is present?" Beverly hesitated. "No, sir." He smiled, appearing skeptical. "That must be amusing." She departed, feeling constricted in her throat, but maintaining a steady composure. Afterward, the other staff members cautioned her concerning him. "That man's a snake," muttered Harold, the groundskeeper. "He feeds on weakness. Don't let him find yours." But Whitlow didn't need to dig. He already had what he wanted. 2 weeks later, invitations started going out for his summer garden party. Beverly overheard the details while changing linens upstairs. It was going to be a large event. Close to 100 guests were expected, with live jazz music and wine flown in from Napa. The staff doubled for the weekend. Every room was scrubbed spotless. Everything had to be perfect. She had experience with large-scale events. The demands didn't bother her. Provided no one focused their attention on her for too long, she could handle it. However, Whitlow had different intentions. The night preceding the party, he intercepted her in the hallway. "You know," he stated, "tomorrow could be your opportunity." She regarded him with confusion. He moved closer, lowering his voice. "Don't be taken aback if I request you perform for the audience. Just a brief distraction. It might be enjoyable." Her stomach tightened. "I would prefer not to, sir." He lifted an eyebrow. "Fortunately, I wasn't seeking a request." And so, the decision was made swiftly. She found no rest that night, not due to worry about humiliation, but because she understood his intentions precisely. He desired a display, and she was uncertain whether to provide it or deny it. By noon the following day, the Whitlow estate no longer resembled a home. It appeared like a performance stage. White tents were erected over the manicured lawn. Cream linen draped the tables, shimmering beneath centerpieces of fresh orchids and color lilies. Jazz musicians tuned their instruments on the terrace. Uniformed staff moved with precision, pouring wine, adjusting placements, and folding napkins with the artistry of origami. Beverly kept her head down, as was her habit. She arranged canapes, assisted in polishing stemware, and patrolled the perimeter with a tray of cucumber water and melting ice cubes. No one made eye contact with her. She didn't object. The feeling of being unseen offered comfort, a sense of security. However, her hands trembled. The source of her anxiety wasn't the piano itself. It was the underlying motive. She was certain Whitlow wasn't offering her a genuine opportunity. He was orchestrating a joke, and she was the target. As the clock reached 4 p.m., the attendees began to arrive. Real estate developers, local judges, business owners, art patrons, and women displaying polished smiles. They flowed in, embracing, laughing, enjoying drinks, and casually mentioning names. From the shade of the veranda, Beverly observed them move across the lawn as if they were born on polished marble. She felt out of place here. Not among these people. Not in this house. Not even in this city some days. But she wasn't here to fit in. She was here to serve. By 615, the band had paused, and Charles Whitlow was feeling confident. 2 glasses of red wine in and a dozen compliments later, he strolled to the center of the lawn and raised his hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice strong enough to draw attention from everyone. "Before dinner is served, I thought we'd enjoy a brief, unexpected entertainment." Beverly paused. Her tray shifted a little. Some guests applauded quietly. Others glanced around, seemingly puzzled. Whitlow proceeded, his smile constrained. "It turns out one of our staff members possesses a hidden talent." "Beverly?" People looked over. She remained still. He waved expansively toward the open French doors leading to the music room. "Someone suggested I play something, recalling I occasionally play the piano." A few laughs rippled through the room, a gentle amusement typical of those accustomed to wealth and charmed by unexpected moments. Applause and quiet whispers followed. Beverly paused, experiencing the uncomfortable feeling of deciding between declining and complying. Yet, she didn't retreat. She gave her tray to a server, dried her hands on her apron, and entered the building. The guests followed, now filled with curiosity. Within the music room, the grand piano was positioned under gentle lighting, appearing as if it had been awaiting attention all day. Beverly settled onto the bench, her posture upright, her heart racing. A profound silence descended upon the room. Charles leaned against the doorway, holding a glass, looking as confident as always. "Whenever you're ready," she observed the keys. They remained still. Her fingers paused above them. The room anticipated something other than music. They expected a jest, a hesitant melody, a discordant note. A source of amusement for later, a way to diminish her. However, Beverly's musical journey didn't begin with jazz, gospel, or any extravagant style. It started with a lullaby her mother would hum, a simple sequence of just 5 notes, as gentle as a whisper. From there, she expanded upon it. Her hands moved deliberately, as if awakening something. Minor chords softened into major ones. Gospel rhythms subtly infiltrated classical phrasing. Jazz embellishments playfully highlighted each shift. The room fell silent. An awkward silence descended, not born of courtesy, but from a shared lack of words. One woman murmured, "Is this staged?" Another, her champagne flute suspended in the air, paused, forgetting to drink. Beverly remained unseeing, her playing as if transported to a different place, a sanctuary, a cherished memory. And Whitlow, still positioned near the door, had lost his smile. Not because of a thwarted scheme, but because of a sudden understanding. She hadn't been the object of ridicule. He had. There are instances in life when time seems to halt. The room, filled with costly timepieces and carefully crafted smiles, remained utterly still as Beverly Gaines infused each note with fragments of her history. Her performance wasn't intended to create an impression, nor was it directed at the mother. She played because for the initial time in several years, no one was dictating her identity. Her fingers moved confidently, not with uncertainty, but with profound, unspoken conviction. Not ostentatious, not rapid, simply genuine. Her left hand maintained the rhythm, consistently, like a quiet inhalation. Her right hand conveyed the narrative. A range of emotions resonated within the music: sorrow, defiance, and a subdued joy that constricted the chest. Even those unfamiliar with music sensed an internal resonance. The sole presence was the music itself. There are no sounds of silverware, no ringing phones, no hushed conversations. Just her, the piano, and 100 people holding their breath. In the corner, the band's saxophonist set down his drink and leaned forward, his jaw slightly parted. Across the room, a woman, visibly upset, murmured to her husband, "She's playing Duke Ellington." She then asked, "But that transition, did you notice it?" That was gospel. Beverly hadn't registered any of it. Instead, she recalled the sound of footsteps from 20 years prior, her mother pacing in their small kitchen in Tallahassee, humming while stirring beans over a low flame. She remembered the cracked metronome resting on top of her childhood piano. She recalled the tremor in her mother's hands near the end, yet she never missed a beat when playing. She recalled abandoning music the day following her mother's passing. She remembered storing it away, similar to a sweater that was outgrown, until today. Today, she allowed it to return. The concluding notes were subdued, lacking drama or spectacle, simply resonant. Like a statement finished because it felt whole, followed by silence. Not uncomfortable, not bewildered, but deeply respectful. Then applause arose. It began with a single person, an elderly man positioned at the rear, clapping deliberately, his gaze unfocused. Subsequently, another joined in. Then, the entire room rose to their feet. It wasn't driven by a sense of courtesy, but by the involuntary movement of their limbs. Beverly rose from a bench. Her hands now shook, not due to anxiety, but due to a different sensation. A feeling she hadn't experienced in years, relief. For the first time, the room regarded her not as a servant, not as an extra, but as someone who'd offered them something genuine. Someone quietly asked, "Who is she?" Beverly made no reply. She merely moved away from the piano and offered a slight nod. She didn't look at anyone and walked toward the hallway. Someone blocked her path. It was Ava Renfield, a local arts patron known for curating talent across the South. She stepped forward, stunned. "That was remarkable. Do you play professionally?" "No, ma'am," Beverly replied, lowering her eyes. "Were you trained?" Beverly paused. "A long time ago," Ava said, blinking. "Well, wherever it was, they should have built a stage around you." Others gathered. One guest asked if she taught lessons. Another offered her a card. A woman, her voice full of genuine feeling, stated, "You made me feel something I haven't felt in years." Whitlow remained still, positioned close to the French doors, his smile absent. His gaze focused on Beverly, but it wasn't playful. It held something different. Could it be embarrassment? Possibly. Yet it appeared to be a pride he would never be able to acknowledge. Beverly didn't pause for his response. She had already given him more than he warranted, and retrieved something she believed she had permanently laid to rest. Outside, the party had resumed. Waiters replenished champagne flutes. The jazz band resumed playing on the terrace, but an alteration was perceptible, as if the tempo had altered. It was as if Beverly's music hadn't fully departed, but resonated within people, close to their hearts. Inside, Beverly had moved to the kitchen. She sought no fanfare. She desired no accolades. She simply needed to breathe. She rested against the counter, gazing at the floor, her apron still fastened. A few minutes elapsed. Harold, the groundskeeper, entered the room. He remained mostly silent, offering only a quiet whistle and crossing his arms. "You certainly know how to bruise a wealthy man's pride," he commented, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. Beverly managed a faint chuckle, though it didn't reflect in her eyes. "I wasn't intending to do anything," she said. "That's precisely why it was so effective," he responded. She poured herself a glass of water. Her hands had become more stable, but her heart still raced. Harold departed shortly afterward. He preferred brevity, and Beverly valued that. Shortly thereafter, Charles Whitlow entered the kitchen. She didn't acknowledge him with a turn of her head. She didn't need to. He placed his glass down with unnecessary force. "You certainly made an impact," he remarked. Beverly remained silent. "I envisioned a brief, amusing exchange," he continued. "I didn't anticipate it evolving into a performance." Still, she offered no reply. He rested against the counter next to her. "Do you know what people are discussing?" "I'm harboring a talent within my own home. It feels as though I'm a character in a television drama." She made contact with his eyes, a look of composure and clarity. "You didn't conceal me. You simply didn't observe." His jaw moved slightly, a single twitch. "You believe you humiliated me?" "No, sir," she replied gently. "You accomplished that entirely on your own." He looked at her for a brief moment, then turned and departed. The subsequent day, telephone calls began. A representative from the Arts Council and a local music school inquired if she would contemplate offering a master class. A former producer received an invitation from a retired colleague for lunch. The experience felt dreamlike. People who had previously ignored her now regarded her differently. Beverly, however, did not respond to most of the calls immediately. She completed her scheduled responsibilities for the week, as was her routine. This included cleaning the floors, folding the laundry, and polishing the silver. Yet, a shift was evident in her movements. She no longer seemed to be attempting to remain unnoticed. That Friday afternoon, she entered Whitlow's office and submitted her resignation. 2 weeks. There was no explanation offered. He didn't request one. He simply nodded, examined the paper for a moment longer than necessary, and responded, "Fine." She prepared to leave. "You'll be back," he called after her. "They always come back," she replied, pausing in the doorway. "Perhaps, but not to you." Beyond the window, the wind rustled the garden hedges. Visitors would arrive and depart. The staff would be changed, and the gatherings would proceed. Yet, the recollection of that afternoon would linger. The issue wasn't the piano. It was the fact that the woman he attempted to control had subtly reminded everyone she wasn't under his authority, a mark he couldn't erase. Beverly Gaines, however, didn't seek retribution. She wasn't pursuing acknowledgement. She was at long last moving towards something positive, and it wasn't Charles Whitlow's house. 2 weeks later, on a quiet Tuesday morning, Beverly Gaines exited 742 Prospect Lane for the last time. There was no elaborate farewell, no presents, and no remarks from Charles Whitlow. The only sound was the creak of the iron gate as she closed it behind her, and the sun felt pleasant on her shoulders as she walked into the street. She still held the same canvas bag she had carried that first day. But she had changed, not because of the comments from the guests, the applause, or the unexpected attention to her talent. Those things had never truly been important to her. What mattered was that she had recalled who she was, and she wouldn't allow anyone to suppress that again. Returning to her apartment, she retrieved an old box from the back of her closet. It contained yellowing sheet music, a chipped metronome, a stack of journals from her early 20s, and a photo of her mother sitting at an upright piano. Eyes closed, hands mid-chord. That night, Beverly played until the neighbors knocked on the wall. She played every song she hadn't let herself touch in years. Pieces she thought she'd forgotten came back with ease. She navigated these experiences with amusement, albeit quietly and openly. Following a week of evenings dedicated to intensive work and mornings spent in quiet thought, she arrived at a resolution. She contacted the Arts Council again, and then the music school. She even responded to a call from a woman who wished to write a profile on her for a regional magazine. One by one, she reestablished contact. Not for recognition, not for praise, but because perhaps her talent could still be of use. After 2 months had passed, Beverly was providing piano lessons twice a week at a community center in Garden City. The majority of her students were children from working-class homes, along with a few adults, women who had always desired to play, but hadn't previously had the opportunity. She was patient, direct, and kind. She never discussed Charles Whitlow, nor did she mention the party. However, information spread. Following a lesson one day, a girl named Nia, who was just under 10 years old and full of energy, glanced up from the piano keys and inquired, "Miss Beverly, did you truly work as a maid at that large house on Prospect Lane?" Beverly smiled. "I did," she responded. "Did they require you to play music?" "No, dear," she replied softly. "They attempted to humiliate me, but I determined what they would receive." Nia seemed puzzled for a moment. Then she smiled. "You're quite well known now," Beverly laughed. "I'm simply someone who recalled her identity." It was a feeling surpassing fame. She walked home that day, her shoulders squared and her head held high. This wasn't due to arrogance, but because she no longer bore any burden. Behind her, Charles Whitlow continued to host gatherings. However, news had circulated regarding the events of that summer evening. People recalled how Beverly played, the ensuing stillness, and how a room overflowing with wealth couldn't affect a woman who had nothing to validate. Some suggested Whitlow had altered since that time. Subtly, he consumed more alcohol and smiled less. Several familiar patrons ceased their visits. However, Beverly gave no consideration to these absences. She had music to instruct, pupils to motivate, and a life that was now entirely her own. Few individuals receive an opportunity to reclaim aspects of themselves they had previously relinquished. But occasionally, if one remains silent for a sufficient duration, the world presents a chance to speak with emphasis. And Beverly utilized hers with poise. For influence isn't always embodied by the most prominent voice present. It can feel like an unexpected melody, leaving people questioning why they ever had reservations about you. If you've ever experienced being underestimated, overlooked, or told you possessed less potential than you truly do, recall Beverly Gaines. And when your opportunity arrives, embrace it as if it were destined for you. Remember to subscribe for further stories of this nature. The bank manager scrutinized her, questioned her statements, and denied her deposit. However, within minutes, a single declaration transformed the situation. She's my mother, and I own this bank. The automatic doors of Hillstone Federal Bank opened with a hiss, allowing the late morning sun and the deliberate steps of 73-year-old Gloria Hightower to enter. She moved with a cane, not due to necessity, but because she preferred the stability it provided. Her dark green dress was neatly pressed. Her silver hair was arranged in the familiar style she's kept for decades. She held her purse in one hand, the other holding a check bearing her name. Gloria was familiar with this location. She had banked here for almost 15 years. The same branch, the same routines. She typically came in during the week, shortly after breakfast with friends at Janine's diner. However, something fell amiss today. The woman at the front desk hardly looked up when Gloria entered. Not even a greeting. That was out of the ordinary. Gloria dismissed it as insignificant. Perhaps the staff was understaffed. It was possible the young woman hadn't been taught to acknowledge older customers. She proceeded to the counter and waited calmly behind a man wearing a baseball cap. After several minutes passed, and when it was her turn, the teller, a young woman, approximately early 20s, offered a hesitant glance over Gloria's shoulder, then murmured, "One moment, please." She then went into a back room. Gloria remained standing quietly, still holding her check, still smiling gently. Shortly afterward, a tall woman wearing a light gray blazer came forward. Her features were distinct. Her blonde hair was pulled straight back, and her eyes appeared analytical rather than observant. A name tag identified her as Leslie Ryland, branch manager. "May I assist you?" Leslie asked, crossing her arms. Gloria raised the check slightly and responded, "Yes, I need to deposit this into my savings account." Leslie did not take the check. Instead, she examined it, then looked back at Gloria. "Could I see your identification, please?" Gloria readily replied, retrieving it from her purse. She presented her driver's license and the check. It originated from a retirement account payout, a standard occurrence. Nothing appeared suspicious. Leslie scrutinized the identification for an extended period, an unusually long time. She then re-examined the check. Leslie then inquired, "How did you come into possession of this?" Gloria appeared surprised. "I'm sorry," she responded. Leslie clarified, waving the check. "This check is for a significant amount. We are obligated to verify it before processing. We have encountered similar situations previously." Gloria responded, tilting her head. "I have deposited checks like this here before. There had never been a problem before." Leslie offered a strained, unconvincing smile. "Banking policies have been revised," she stated. "I'm sure you appreciate that." A gentleman seated nearby subtly adjusted his position. Gloria noticed it from her peripheral vision. The woman standing behind her made a quiet noise. Gloria sensed that someone was observing them. Gloria inhaled deeply. "Ms. Ryland, I have all my required documentation. This is my account. I have been receiving direct deposit, and I've been a customer at First National Bank for years. My name, my address, and my identification all correspond perfectly." Still, Leslie remained firm. "We still require a more thorough verification. Please come with me to the back." That's when Gloria experienced it. Not fear, not shame, something akin to offense. Not just for herself, but for every older woman who had been spoken down to. For every person who had been regarded with suspicion simply for entering a room. "I prefer to remain here," Gloria stated resolutely. Leslie moved closer, softening her tone. "Ma'am, you must cooperate, or we will have to place a hold on the funds and report potential fraud." Instances like this have occurred previously. That's when Gloria experienced a tightening in her chest. She wasn't inclined to engage in a dispute. not with an individual of this nature, not in the presence of onlookers. However, she wasn't planning to depart, so she opted to retrieve her phone. Gloria's hands moved with measured precision, steady rather than trembling, as she extracted her phone from her purse. Upon the screen illuminating, Leslie's gaze narrowed. "I am contacting my son," Gloria stated calmly, scrolling through her contacts. "He will resolve this situation." Leslie gave a humorless chuckle. "Ma'am, contacting your son won't alter procedure. We operate under established guidelines. If there's no cause for concern, there's no need for alarm." Gloria didn't respond. She simply raised the phone to her ear and moved a pace to the side, distancing herself from the counter. She was weary of being addressed, as if she lacked understanding, as if she were incapable of handling her finances. Two tellers positioned behind the glass exchanged glances. The young man at the end of the line advanced a short distance, seemingly about to speak, but then stopped. The room was quiet, punctuated only by the gentle clicking of keyboards and the quiet whir of a copier in the corner. "Hey, baby," Gloria said into the phone. "I'm at the bank. Hillstone on Meridian. They're having difficulty verifying my check again." She paused. "Yes. Her name's Leslie." Leslie's jaw tightened. "Excuse me, ma'am. Sharing employee names over the phone is something we avoid." Gloria didn't acknowledge the request. "Acknowledgement. I'm feeling well, just a bit tired." Following a brief silence. "Okay, I will remain here." She disconnected the call and returned the phone to her purse. Subsequently, with the same composed demeanor, she stated, "My son is en route." Leslie folded her arms. "Ma'am, I must reiterate, elevated voices or disruptive behavior may result in dismissal." Gloria inclined her head slightly. "Do I appear to be causing a problem?" Leslie's face reddened. She averted her gaze momentarily, then returned her attention. "I have a duty to safeguard this establishment. Improper fund verification puts the bank at risk. Do you believe I am a risk?" "I believe you're not being helpful." Leslie retorted sharply. That was the breaking point. That single word. The man standing 2 places back murmured something quietly. The woman behind Gloria moved closer and said, "She is being courteous. You are the one raising your voice." Leslie addressed them. "Please refrain from interfering. We are conducting a private transaction." "It doesn't seem very private," the woman remarked. Gloria remained silent throughout the exchange. She felt no need to dispute anything or offer explanations. She simply needed to wait. 5 minutes elapsed. Leslie moved away, feigning a check of her computer, but her gaze kept lifting, much like a dog anticipating the mail carrier. The young teller from earlier approached and murmured something into Leslie's ear. Her gaze moved towards the entrance. Then the glass doors opened once more. A man entered, dressed in a charcoal gray suit. He appeared to be in his early 40s, wearing a crisp white shirt, but without a tie. He seemed calm, yet focused, and moved with a quiet, purposeful stride. He made no visual sweep of the room, instead walking directly towards the lobby center, toward Gloria. "Hi, Mama." Gloria returned a gentle smile. "Hey, baby." Immediately, the room's atmosphere altered. The man turned to address the reception desk. "Is there an issue with my mother's account?" Leslie moved forward, hesitant about whether to extend a handshake or request identification. She opted for a formal nod instead. "This is your mother?" he asked. "Yes," he responded briefly. "My name is Grant Hightower." Leslie's mouth opened slightly. Her gaze shifted around the room, then returned to Gloria, then to Grant. "Mr. Hightower?" Grant retrieved his leather card holder and laid it on the counter. It displayed his ID, his business card, and his title, Hillstone Federal, Executive Board Chair. Leslie found herself unable to speak. For a full 10 seconds, silence filled the room. Leslie's gaze remained fixed on the card, as if expecting it to ignite. A subtle muscle spasm flickered across her cheek, the type that arises when a mind struggles to comprehend what the eyes have witnessed. Grant refrained from speaking quickly. He kept his hands clasped before him, standing composed and silent, his voice even but undeniably resolute. "I'm asking one more time," he stated. "Was there a problem with my mother's account?" Leslie hesitated, then asked, "Mr. Hightower?" "We were just following procedures." Large checks need to be verified, and Grant interrupted, not loudly but sharply. You looked her in the face and decided she wasn't credible. You questioned where the check came from. You asked how she came into possession of it. Does that sound like standard procedure? Leslie's mouth opened again, but no words came. Her face had gone a full shade lighter. I've reviewed those procedures myself, Grant continued. I approved those actions last quarter. That documentation contains no instruction to question a long-standing customer while disregarding her identification. Certainly not with a public display in front of witnesses. The bank was quiet. The only sounds were the clicking of keyboards from employees appearing to work and the consistent hum of the air conditioning above. No one was willing to avert their gaze now. Gloria stood nearby, arms folded. She wasn't smiling. She didn't seem pleased. She seemed weary. I'm truly sorry, Mr. Hightower, Leslie stated rapidly. This is simply a misunderstanding. I didn't intend to offend anyone. But you did, Grant countered. You humiliated her. I didn't. You did, Leslie replied. Grant's voice remained even. That was what made his statement so impactful. There was no shouting, no theatrical displays, just the facts, just his presence. Leslie's voice trembled. I didn't realize she was your mother. Grant looked at her. Why would that change anything? Leslie started to speak, then stopped. Do you understand how that sounds? He inquired. Leslie spoke the words aloud. For the first time, Leslie genuinely observed Gloria. She truly looked. It wasn't solely embarrassment now visible on her face. There was fear. The fear of repercussions. Have a seat, Grant said, indicating the chair behind the counter. I'll handle the deposit. Leslie paused. That wasn't an invitation. Leslie turned slowly and walked toward the back, her shoes clicking hollowly against the tile. Grant approached the counter, took the check, glanced at it, and typed a few numbers into the system. The young teller observed with admiration. Here you go, he said, giving the receipt to his mother. Full deposit. Effective immediately. Gloria accepted the slip, folded it, and nodded. Thank you, baby. Are you okay? I'm fine. They paused, a mother and son in a peaceful setting. Then Gloria remarked, You didn't need to come all the way here. Grant gave her a look. Yes, I did. But you're busy. You have meetings. Aboard a run. He shrugged. You managed a household for 25 years with one income, for kids, and a Buick that barely started. I can spare a few minutes. She chuckled softly. You always were dramatic, he smiled. And you always were the calm one. But the moment wasn't over yet. Grant turned slowly, letting his eyes sweep the room. The customers remained present, some appearing to examine their phones, while others paused during transactions, attempting to blend into the background while still observing everything. The woman positioned behind Gloria retreated slightly, creating room for them. The man who had spoken previously offered Grant a discreet nod of acknowledgement. Grant made no direct comments to them, but he did not dismiss their presence. He understood they would retain this moment, each in every aspect, not only due to his identity, but also because of what they witnessed. A woman felt diminished until the reality arrived, formally dressed. Leslie's absence was brief. She returned with a senior associate, visibly anxious, restless, attempting a smile, but unable to manage it. The older man spoke quietly to Grant, extended an apology, then indicated the rear offices. But Grant remained still. She is well now, he stated, pointing to his mother. However, this is no longer a simple exchange. Mr. Hightower began, We absolutely recognize that, and we're taking it seriously. Ms. Ryland has been here less than a year. She's still adjusting to the... Stop, Grant interjected. Don't explain her behavior to me. That's not your job. That's hers. Leslie remained still, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She appeared to be attempting to suppress tears, or perhaps prevent herself from speaking. According to Grant, addressing the associate, the task at hand is to assess the situation within this room and grasp the implications of a valued client being subjected to treatment resembling that of a criminal, solely due to her appearance not aligning with the image of someone who owns a yacht. Grant emphasized, raising a hand, Have you ever met someone resembling my mother and considered she must be concealing something? Have you ever scrutinized a white customer depositing a check? The man visibly recoiled. That's not. Don't deceive me, Grant stated. I'm not the board chair today. I am simply a son. And what I observed this morning was a woman who instilled in me the values of honesty, patience, and respect, being questioned as if she had fabricated her own signature. Gloria eventually intervened. She said, "Baby," but Grant wasn't done speaking. He stated that she could have been questioned with courtesy. She could have been spoken to privately, and any concerns explained. Instead, a public spectacle was created, and she was made to feel unwelcome. The only reason for the interruption was my appearance in a tailored jacket. A silence followed. Gloria surveyed the room, noting the expressions, some filled with shame, others with anger, still others with inspiration. She lightly touched her son's arm. "Let's leave," she said quietly. "Let's not say another word." He faced her, his jaw rigid, his chest tense. But then he saw it in her eyes. That familiar calm. The same calm she possessed while working 2 jobs and still preparing dinner. Amidst challenging circumstances, she demonstrated remarkable poise. He acknowledged this with a nod. All right. They proceeded toward the exit together, navigating past the tellers, the customers, and the visibly shaken manager who struggled to meet her gaze. As they prepared to leave through the doors, Grant paused. He turned, looked at Leslie, and said softly, "Every customer who walks in here deserves the same respect you'd give your boss. Because you never know who they are or who raised them." They departed, but the repercussions were just beginning. As Grant and Gloria reached the sidewalk outside, his phone was already vibrating. Initially, it was his assistant, then a member of the board, and subsequently the bank's general counsel. The news had spread quicker than either of them anticipated. A customer had captured a portion of the incident on video. It was already being shared. Gloria observed him. "You won't answer that." Grant allowed it to continue ringing. "No, not at this moment." They continued walking at a slow, even pace, the sun warming Gloria's head as cars passed leisurely down Meridian Avenue. She remained silent initially. So did he. It was a moment of quiet they both required. "You don't have to rush down here," she eventually said. Grant chuckled but didn't smile. "I say that every time." He added, "I can handle myself." "I know you can," Gloria replied. She stopped before a bench and sat down. Grant remained standing close by, looking at his phone screen without unlocking it. The notifications accumulated, resembling stacked bricks. However, he wasn't prepared to construct anything from them just yet. Within the bank, Leslie Ryland remained motionless in her compact glass office. A regional manager had already contacted her. Human resources required a report before the day's end. Yet, none of that held significance for her at that moment. The image of how Grant had regarded her lingered in her mind, as if revealing a perspective that diminished her, not through disparagement, but because it highlighted the limitations of her own assessments. The subsequent morning brought forth a communication from Hillstone Federal's board. It announced the commencement of an internal investigation, alongside assurances that customers will be notified regarding adjustments to sensitivity training and customer relations policy. However, this represented merely a public statement. The truly significant developments unfolded privately. Later that week, Grant took his seat at the head of the conference table, the familiar space typically used for investment strategy and profit reports. This meeting, however, had a different purpose. "I want every manager to recertify on customer service protocol," he announced, "but not with those same corporate videos from 5 years ago. We're engaging outside instructors. I don't want lectures. I want eye contact, role play, and reflection." An older board member expressed surprise. "That's a significant change." "It should be," Grant responded. "What about the manager?" Grant hesitated. He was reluctant to dismiss Leslie, not because she didn't warrant consequences, but because he didn't want this to appear as retribution. That wasn't the upbringing his mother provided. "She is suspended," he stated eventually, "subject to review." However, his focus is on addressing the underlying cultural issues that led her to believe that kind of conduct was permissible. Later that evening, Gloria settled into her preferred chair near the window at her home. The house was quiet, punctuated only by the ticking of the old wall clock and the gentle simmering of her evening tea. Grant was settled on a couch, his tie undone, his shoes slightly loosened. "You handled it well," she said. He shrugged. "I let myself get angry." "You should have," he replied, looking up. "You're not upset," Gloria said with a wry laugh. "Darling, I've experienced far more challenging situations." She continued, "This isn't the first instance someone has attempted to make me feel like I don't belong, and it likely won't be the last." "That's the most troubling aspect," Grant stated. She took a sip of her tea, acknowledging that this wasn't a new situation. "You can't control how people treat you," Grant said, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. "Only how you respond to them." Gloria smiled. "I just dislike that you had to deal with that kind of behavior at this stage in your life." "That's the interesting thing," she replied. "The older I become, the less it affects me." What caused me pain wasn't her words. It was the fact that she believed she could speak to anyone in that manner. She paused. Perhaps now she won't. Despite the difficulties, a positive outcome eventually emerged. The subsequent week, Gloria revisited the bank. She wore the same shoes and carried the same purse, but her demeanor had changed. Upon entering, every employee behind the counter visibly adjusted. The newly appointed temporary manager, Denise Alvarez, a woman with a quiet voice, approached the desk to greet her directly. "Miss Hightower," she said kindly, "we are pleased to see you." Gloria offered a slight smile. "I'm simply here to withdraw some funds." "Certainly. I will assist you myself." As they walked toward the counter, Gloria observed that the posters on the wall had been updated. The advertisements for loans and savings plans remained, but new posters, a series titled Respect is Standard, now hung near the front. Each featured portraits of real customers from the local community, all sharing the same tagline: "We see you. We serve you. We respect you." It wasn't a complete solution, but it was a beginning. Denise processed her withdrawal, demonstrating patience and clarity. Straightforward and professional. Before her departure, Denise stated, "We're holding community meetings beginning next month. These will be listening sessions. Grant asked us to invite value customers like you. Would you be willing to speak?" Gloria expressed surprise. "You want me to deliver a speech?" The response came, "Not a speech. Simply share your story, however you prefer." Gloria considered the request. "I will attend, but I won't present anything in a misleading way." That's precisely what they wanted. She left that day not feeling entirely satisfied, but she felt acknowledged. And at her age, that carried weight. Later that evening, Gloria sat across from Grant again, this time at a quiet booth inside an old barbecue joint in Fort Worth they both liked. It smelled like hickory and cornbread, and nobody there seemed to notice what either of them did for a living. "You remember that day you got in trouble in 7th grade?" she asked suddenly, picking at her baked beans. "Which one?" "The incident with Mr. Hale came to mind. He accused you of plagiarism regarding your paper." Grant sighed. Yes, he recalled. You returned home holding that paper, visibly upset. Tears streamed down your face as you insisted you hadn't cheated. And he believed you. Yet, he still made you rewrite the entire paper. He chuckled. You said that rewriting something sometimes demonstrates its originality. She affirmed exactly. Grant turned to her. "But that's what happened?" Gloria replied negatively. It seemed this occasion required assistance from another. He paused, allowing the statement to resonate. Then she added, "I didn't raise you to be rich, Grant. I raised you to be right." He glanced at her across the table, a palpable feeling just below the surface. "I know," he responded. "And sometimes," she continued, "doing the right thing means you forfeit ease. You enter spaces that aren't welcoming. You voice your thoughts when silence would be simpler. And you visit the bank even when it feels demeaning. No matter the circumstance, it impacts those who care." He blinked once, twice, then smiled. You really should speak at that meeting," she said. "Oh, I will," Gloria replied. "But I'm bringing my purse, my cane, and my full voice. No softening it this time." Grant laughed. "You never softened it. You just made it sound kind." She grinned, then picked up her napkin and dabbed the corner of her mouth. "Kind doesn't mean quiet." The situation didn't conclude there, as Gloria had further remarks. A community meeting took place 3 weeks later within a simple civic center located just off Lancaster Avenue. There were no special decorations, and no filming crews were present. Instead, attendees found folding chairs, a podium, and a hand-painted sign that read, "Listening Circle, Hillstone Federal Bank." Upon Gloria's arrival, the room was already half full, comprising both bank staff and customers. The gathering included older folks, young professionals, small business owners, and a few individuals she didn't recognize, presumably there to observe or report. She wore a cobalt blue blouse that highlighted the silver in her hair. She avoided flashy jewelry, opting for her usual pearl earrings, the same pair she wore to her granddaughter's graduation. Upon her arrival, the conversation quieted. People turned and heads lifted. Grant was seated near the front, but remained seated. He understood his mother didn't require an escort. Not on this day. When it was Gloria's time to address the gathering, she didn't immediately move to the podium. Instead, she positioned herself just beside it, close enough to be easily heard, but maintaining enough distance to make eye contact with everyone present without unnecessary ceremony. The room fell silent. She cleared her throat. "I'm Gloria Hightower. I'm a retired school nurse. I've resided here for more than 40 years. And I'm a client of Hillstone Federal for almost 15 years." There were some nods, some quiet acknowledgments. "I am here today because I was asked to recount my experience. However, this extends beyond what occurred that morning at the bank. That portion is straightforward. I experienced disrespectful treatment. I was questioned regarding a check bearing my name. I was made to feel out of place. This wasn't due to anything I said, nor was it due to anything I did. It was solely based on my appearance." Her voice remained steady. It didn't waver, but it resonated low, full, and unwavering. "Initially, I wasn't angry. I felt pain. I was certain I had committed no wrongdoing. Nevertheless, someone deemed me questionable. Someone decided my dignity could be compromised." She paused, allowing those words to resonate. "I intended to remain silent, simply contacting my son and waiting calmly. However, I came to understand something later. People rely on silence when they behave in such a manner. They depend on our courtesy, our tolerance, our weariness. But occasionally, the most honorable course of action is to object." A hush fell over the room. "My intention isn't to damage anyone's professional standing. This isn't about retribution. It's about achieving change. Not for my benefit. I am 73 years old and possess a sufficient understanding of the world. But for the individual who next enters a bank with trust and departs feeling diminished." A man positioned towards the rear dabbed at his eye. A woman seated across the aisle gripped her notepad without putting pen to paper. Gloria rested her hands in her lap. "We reside in a nation that frequently discusses principles of equity, regarding values, regarding treating everyone equally. But those ideas hold no substance unless they manifest in everyday interactions. At the checkout, during phone calls, in the way we address someone who appears different." She glanced at Grant briefly. He offered no smile. He offered no nod. He simply observed her the way one observes a fire that warms and humbles simultaneously. "Thank you for listening," she said, then stepped back without fanfare. The room did not erupt in applause. It did not require it. A few hands clapped gently. A few heads bowed. But what lingered was heavier than noise. It was reflection. After the meeting, people lined up, not for handshakes or photos, but to talk, to share. One woman said she'd experienced the same thing at a different branch. A young man said it reminded him of the way his grandmother used to be followed around stores. And the bank staff, well, most of them just said thank you, with eyes that conveyed more than their words. That night, while Gloria sat in her kitchen with tea in hand, Grant texted her, "You were incredible." She responded slowly, "They'll remember that." She continued, "I didn't do it to be remembered. I did it so they remember each other." $1 million neighborhood was constructed on land that had been in his family for over a century. However, when Elijah presented a handwritten clause dated 1923, the entire development and every home within it legally reverted to his ownership. Elijah Jackson didn't require an alarm clock. For 30 years, he had woken naturally just before sunrise, made his coffee, and walked out to the back porch of his father's old farmhouse near Opelika, Alabama. From that quiet wooden deck, he had a clear view across the southern field, the very field where his great-grandfather Otis grew sweet potatoes in the 1930s, and where Elijah's own children had once played in the tall grass. But that morning, something was amiss. The ground felt altered. It trembled. Elijah peered into the distance. Beyond the trees, past the fence line, plumes of red dirt rose into the sky. The machinery was present, heavy, loud, and incongruous. He placed his coffee down and headed towards the sound. Reaching the ridge, he halted, stunned. 3 bulldozers were visible. Behind them, construction teams in hard hats and neon vests were marking the ground with flags, as if claiming it was unclaimed land. But it wasn't. He quickened his pace, the Georgia clay swirling up around his boots. "Hey," he called. A woman in a light gray blazer turned toward him, sunglasses and a clipboard in hand. She seemed out of place in a field. She appeared someone who had never worn work boots. "Can I assist you, sir?" she inquired, her voice suggesting she already anticipated the response. Elijah surveyed the scene. "What is the purpose of your presence on my land?" Her eyebrow showed little movement. This parcel was approved for residential development under West Haven HOA's expansion permit. "You must be mistaken." "Mistaken?" Elijah's voice rose slightly. "My name is Elijah Jackson. That piece of land has been in my family since 1923. It is not for sale. It never has been." The woman held her clipboard up like a shield. "County records indicate this section was listed as unclaimed due to boundary discrepancies during the last zoning update. You are welcome to speak with our legal team, but construction is already underway." Elijah's heart was thumping hard now, but not from fear. "Ma'am, that land is not unclaimed. I have walked it every morning since I was 27 years old. My father was born right over that rise. You're building on ground that holds more history than you could encompass with your permits." She offered a polite, empty smile. "Then I suggest you take it up with zoning and planning. We're moving forward." The machines revved louder behind her. Foundations were being dug. Trees that once shaded Elijah's childhood baseball games were now being stripped away root by root. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He simply turned and walked back towards his house. His pace was slower now. Inside, he went directly to the cabinet above the fireplace. It held old papers, maps, and deeds, dusty and yellowed with age. He recalled his father once saying Otis didn't trust anybody with this land, not even the government. At the time, Elijah had considered it mere paranoia. But as the ground outside was being torn apart, that paranoia felt more like protection. He carefully unfolded the brittle deed and saw it. The faded ink revealed Otis Jackson's name. 88 acres were purchased for $480 in 1923. There were no loans, no banks involved. It was built on sweat, grit, and the unwavering pride of a man determined to leave nothing for anyone else to claim. Elijah settled down. Documents lay before him. A growing unease began in his stomach. Something felt amiss. This wasn't simply a clerical error. He reached for the phone and contacted the Lee County Zoning Office. "I'm calling regarding a construction crew impacting a portion of my property. My name is Elijah Jackson. My family has owned this land for over 100 years. The person I spoke with initially responded with a detached, scripted tone. They stated that if my land was affected by the zoning realignment, I should have received a mail notification. I did not receive any notification. They suggested that notices can occasionally be lost, and then ended the conversation. It was dismissed with that, lost. Potentially, decades of family ownership could be jeopardized by a misplaced envelope. However, Elijah wasn't solely feeling anger. He recalled a story his father had shared with him. Years had passed since Elijah had last touched the old trunk located at the back of the hallway closet. He pulled it out slowly, coughing as dust filled the narrow corridor. His knees cracked as he knelt, unlatching the brass lock. The lid opened with a tired creak. Inside, among black and white photos, funeral programs, and Otis's tarnished railroad watch, was a bundle of paper wrapped in oilcloth, precisely where his father indicated it would be. Elijah was seated on the floor, cross-legged, carefully unrolling the cloth and retrieving a weighty, leather-bound envelope. This was the original deed, the one Otis had kept for himself. Initially, it appeared like any other legal document: printed text, handwritten notes in the margins, a wax seal partially worn. However, concealed roughly midway through the second page, in Otis's faint, cursive writing, was something unexpected. In his own handwriting, squeezed into the margins, a note read, "If any buildings are built on this land without the agreement of the deed holder or their closest relative, those buildings will automatically belong to the deed holder and no payment will be given." This was witnessed and signed on February 2nd, 1923. Elijah blinked. He read it again and again. His hands trembled. He wasn't legally trained, unlike lawyers, but he knew the story behind that clause. It concerned how Otis had distrusted men in suits, particularly landmen. Following a near deception in 1931, where he almost sold half the property for a minimal price, Otis had personally compensated a notary to assist him in drafting what he termed a safeguard impenetrable to any attempt to bypass it. This safeguard wasn't constructed from physical materials like wood or wire. It was comprised of carefully chosen words. Elijah reached for the telephone once more. He contacted Mr. Boone, the local attorney his family had relied on for 3 generations. "I need to show you something," Elijah stated. "It's about the land, about Otis." After 3 hours, Elijah was seated in the worn leather armchair, facing Boone's desk. The lawyer peered through bifocals, carefully examining the document. "Well, I'll be," he remarked, tapping a knuckle against the clause. "You don't see this kind of thing anymore, but it's clever. If this was notarized and filed with the original deed, it's enforceable." "It is notarized," Elijah said. Otis made absolutely certain of that. Boone nodded. "It's old, yes, but if it's on the record, it's still the law. It might be buried in archives somewhere, but that doesn't make it disappear. So what do I do?" "First," Boone said, pulling a legal pad toward him, "you don't say a word to those developers. Let them build. Every house they finish becomes yours. It wasn't due to your identity, but because of Otis. That man didn't simply leave you land. He left you a carefully constructed snare. A remarkably clever one." Elijah relaxed, feeling the significance of it acutely. He's been prepared to initiate a conflict, enter courtrooms, and navigate bureaucratic hurdles to demonstrate what rightfully belonged to him. But Otis had already handled the struggle. Now, Elijah only needed to wait. Nevertheless, he wasn't foolish. He contacted 2 additional lawyers, just to be certain. One for Montgomery, one for Birmingham. He provided them with scanned copies of the deed, the clause, and the notarization. Both contacted him again within a week. "This is the most secure private property clause I've ever encountered," one stated, "Mr. Jackson. It's as if your great-grandfather constructed a legal landmine." The other remarked, "I've never seen anything like it. As long as you record the construction, everything they build becomes yours. Every nail, every foundation." Consequently, Elijah purchased a drone and employed a professional surveyor. Motion sensor cameras were installed along the southern field's edge. He meticulously documented everything. This included timestamps, recorded footage, ground measurements, copies of sale signs, and open house flyers. Each day, he observed the actions of the West Haven HOA, actions that he believed they should never have taken. They constructed as if they held absolute ownership and marketed as if they had the right to sell. But Elijah understood the truth. And Otis? Otis had anticipated this day for 100 years. If the clause proved to be true, Elijah understood he had a single course of action remaining: to wait. Each morning, shortly after sunrise, Elijah would position himself on the grassy ridge, the site of the former barbed wire fence. He would rest against the wooden post that he and his father had set into the ground many years prior, with his arms crossed and a camera around his neck, observing. The land below was undergoing change. Where sweet potatoes once grew and his cousin had broken his leg attempting to ride a makeshift dirt bike, now stood rows of modern homes. The exteriors featured vinyl siding in muted colors, fenced-in backyards, and driveways so smooth they didn't feel like they belonged in the country. It felt like watching someone else rearrange your childhood memories without permission. Roads were paved with names like Sycamore Lane and Sunset Walk. Pretty names, but lacking any history. Light poles were installed, sidewalks were poured, and even a cul-de-sac was added that cut right through the grove where Elijah's mother had planted muscadines. The HOA proceeded quickly. Too quickly. Within a month, foundations were set for 20 homes. Real estate agents began appearing on weekends, conducting open houses and offering guided tours to couples and retirees. Large signs near the front entrance announced, "Now selling," starting at $385,000. Elijah remained silent. He simply observed. He recorded everything. Daily drone footage was recorded. Close-up photos of property markers were taken. Videos documented workers pouring concrete, installing electrical lines, and setting frames. He organized all of this in a folder on his laptop labeled Otis's Revenge. Occasionally, a project manager or a site supervisor noticed him. Sometimes they waved. Once a man with a clipboard called out, "Morning," with forced cheerfulness. Elijah did not reply. His purpose was not to socialize. He was there to observe. Then Jessica arrived. Jessica Brenner. She remained consistently the woman she had always been, clipboard and blazer. Initially, she didn't recognize Elijah upon his reappearance at the Ridge. However, within 3 weeks, she began to acknowledge him. On one occasion, she smiled and called out, "Still watching us, Mr. Jackson?" Elijah responded by raising his camera and photographing her. She did not smile again afterward. New houses appeared rapidly, like weeds spreading. The swift pace was unsettling. One day, there would be bare ground. 3 days elapsed, and the construction reached the stage of a complete frame and roof. By the close of the second month, 32 homes had been framed. Of those, 16 were completed, featuring laid sod and polished front porches ready for weekend viewings. Elijah, however, remained undeterred. He proceeded to the county clerk's office to retrieve the most recent sales records. He observed West Haven's name appearing alongside buyers, with the buyers primarily from out of state, Ohio, Florida, and even some originating from California. He meticulously recorded observations, noting each closing date. He verified the location of each home, confirming its presence within the 88-acre zone. All residences were situated inside Otis's boundary. All of them. He even overheard Jessica one morning, speaking on the phone while walking the site. She said, "Yeah, Phase 1's flying off the market. We're starting Phase 2 next month. No issues on our end. The local guy watching from the Ridge, just some nosy landowner trying to stir up drama. We're clear." Elijah clenched his teeth, but remained silent. She had no idea. He possessed 3 legal opinions supporting his position. He had documented evidence, with timestamps, of construction on the contested land. He had Otis's clause, and crucially, he had time. Allowing them to build wasn't merely a tactic, it was a matter of justice. Each home they finished, every square foot they sold, contributed to a debt they were unaware of accumulating. Elijah had already calculated the figures. If the construction followed the initial plan for all 156 homes, along with the community clubhouse and parkland, the total value of the real estate would approach $70 million. This would be transferred to him. Jessica believed she was developing a neighborhood, but Elijah understood the reality. She was, in effect, expanding his portfolio. However, as the sold signs accumulated, Elijah started questioning how long he could delay the arrival of actual families. The first time Elijah observed children cycling on the newly constructed sidewalks, he experienced a disconcerting sensation in his chest. A profound sadness, not anger nor regret. The children were oblivious. Naturally, they played, circling, chasing, laughing as children do. Their parents watched, enjoying coffee on porches overlooking the Jackson property. This was land Elijah's great-grandfather had cleared manually. A few houses down, a young couple was unpacking boxes. The man waved. Elijah raised his hand a little, without knowing why. He was unfamiliar with them. They were unfamiliar with him. The new driveway occupied what had previously been his grandmother's garden. He walked home at a slower pace that day, not due to any need discomfort, but because the anger that had propelled him was beginning to transform into a different feeling. That evening, he was alone in his den, the deed spread out before him, as usual. The clause remained present, tangible, and still his. However, now he saw faces connected to the houses. He recognized people, not suits, not developers. Families were attempting to establish themselves on property they were unaware was not available for purchase. He reached for the telephone and contacted Boone. "I need to discuss something with you," Elijah stated. Boone responded, "I'm listening." Elijah continued, "If I delay until all the houses are completed, the price will increase significantly. However, if I intervene now, I might prevent these people from facing a difficult situation. They've just moved in, Boone. I observed a young girl riding a bicycle with training wheels today." A considerable silence followed. Boone's voice softened. "That presents a difficult ethical decision, Elijah. You are requesting something that is not permissible. It's a personal matter. Legally, you are justified, as Otis confirmed. However, what kind of justice do you seek?" "I am unwilling to cause harm to these individuals," Elijah stated. "Yet, I do want West Haven to be held accountable. They didn't merely trespass. They obliterated my family's history as if it held no significance. Then perhaps the true inquiry is it possible to inflict pain upon them without harming the people who purchased those homes in good faith?" Elijah rubbed his eyes. "Is it possible?" Boone paused once more. "Gaining their commitment requires careful consideration and meticulous attention to detail. Allow them to actively participate in the process, enabling them to take ownership. Ensure your guidance is clear and impactful, so it resonates even before others become involved." Elijah reclined in his chair. The ceiling fan rotated slowly above him. "I observed someone planting a tree today," he remarked quietly. He appeared pleased, as if envisioning this as their permanent residence. "Perhaps it still could be," Boone responded. "The outcome relies on your actions." That night, Elijah experienced little sleep. He revisited the perimeter of the property, holding a flashlight, observing lights shimmering from windows overlooking the southern field. Within those houses, families were establishing themselves, displaying pictures, preparing meals, and putting children to sleep. He couldn't have been responsible for their losses, yet he couldn't overlook the arrogance of West Haven, Jessica Brenner's dismissive gesture, the unanswered calls from their lawyers, and their disregard for generations, as if constructing on unclaimed territory. Elijah remained motionless for an extended period at the tree line. The wind rustled through the tall grass. He recalled Otis, remembering the nights that man had kept watch on the porch, a shotgun resting across his lap, prepared for any trouble. Otis favored immediate action. However, Elijah valued strategy and carefully considered his options. He resolved to wait until the final brick was in place, not to inflict harm upon the families, but to ensure those who had shown disrespect towards his family faced the complete consequence. And then, he would ensure no one ever forgot the name Otis Jackson. But Elijah understood that patience wouldn't simplify the next phase. It would only make it more significant. The notification arrived by mail, enclosed within a polished invitation featuring gold detailing. "You are cordially invited to the grand opening of West Haven Estates, Phase 2 celebration and ribbon-cutting ceremony. Join us for food, live music, and a look at the future of luxury living in Easter Alabama." Elijah examined the card for a minute before setting it on the kitchen counter beside the deed. The event was scheduled for a Saturday morning in April. At that time, 138 homes were completely built. An additional 18 were undergoing final inspections. The community center had recently opened, featuring a pool, tennis courts, and a marble floor lobby resembling a country club. It was being hailed as the crown jewel of the county, and every inch of it was situated on Jackson land. The night before, Elijah carefully ironed his only suit, the one he wore to church, weddings, and funerals, paying special attention to the cuffs, a detail Otis would have emphasized. He packed a leather folder containing the original deed, the notarized clause, the surveyor's report, photo evidence, and legal opinions. He placed it on the passenger seat with the care one would give a newborn child. As he arrived at the newly paved entrance of West Haven Estates, the morning sun broke through. Banners fluttered in the breeze. A white tent stood on the clubhouse lawn where guests enjoyed champagne and sampled small sandwiches off silver trays. He parked near the back of the lot, concealed from view. No one recognized him. Not yet. From the periphery of the gathering, Elijah observed as Jessica Brenner, wearing a vibrant yellow dress and large sunglasses, approached the podium. Microphones were adjusted. Camera flashes went off. "Welcome," she exclaimed. "Today signifies both the completion of our second phase and the beginning of a promising new era for our community." Applause resonated. The mayor stood beside her. Several county officials, whom Elijah had contacted months prior without receiving a response, were also present. Jessica continued, her voice gaining intensity with each phrase. "Thanks to our exceptional team and the backing of our local government, West Haven is now a home to 156 families and expanding." The string quartet played gently in the background. Elijah moved forward deliberately, the sound of his shoes on the gravel noticeable. Jessica looked towards him, but showed no reaction. Not yet. He raised his voice just enough to be heard over the music. "Before you cut that ribbon," he said calmly, and the crowd fell silent, heads turning. Jessica blinked. "Mr. Jackson," she said, her voice strained. "This is a private event." "I understand precisely what this concerns," Elijah stated. "That is why I am present." The mayor appeared doubtful. "Could you please elaborate on the problem?" Elijah raised a leather folder. "I am Elijah Jackson. My family has held title to this land for more than 100 years, and every house, road, tennis court, and mailbox West Haven constructed sits on property that was never legally theirs." Murmurs of confusion rippled through the audience. Jessica moved away from the podium. "We pursued all legal avenues. A zoning error occurred some time back that you failed to fix," Elijah added, opening the file. "And significantly, this deed from 1923 includes a provision drafted by my great-grandfather. It specifies that any building constructed without permission transfers ownership to the deed's owner." He presented the document. A reporter, standing close, moved to photograph the page. Jessica's expression remained unchanged. "You're attempting to deceive us," she whispered. "That clause is invalid after this length of time." Elijah remained unmoved. "I've had this examined by 3 lawyers. They all concurred. It carries legal weight. This land belongs to me, and everything constructed upon it as well." A man in a gray suit spoke quietly to Jessica. She visibly paled. The mayor cleared his throat. "We might need to suspend the ceremony." Jessica faced Elijah again, her voice now firm. "You observed. You monitored our construction, and you remained silent. I informed you on your initial visit that it was my land," he stated calmly. "I saw you smile, and you called security, instructed me to speak with your legal team. So I did." A gasp came from behind you. It could have been a homeowner or someone else. Reporters were now gathering, with flash bulbs popping and pens writing furiously. Jessica appeared as if she'd swallowed glass. "You'll never get away with this," she whispered. "I don't have to get away with anything," Elijah replied. "You passed the folder to me." He closed it carefully and stepped back. The ceremony was halted. No ribbon was cut. Elijah recognized this as merely the initial stage. The significant repercussions hadn't yet materialized. The following morning, Elijah's phone began ringing before sunrise. An unknown number appeared. He allowed it to proceed to voicemail. Subsequently, it rang again and again. By the afternoon, he had accumulated 12 missed calls for voicemails and 2 emails flagged as urgent from West Haven's legal team. By evening, the local news had broadcast a segment entitled "Man Claims Ownership of Entire HOA Community." Is it legal? The anchor appeared bewildered. Elijah was not. He was at his kitchen table with Boone, examining the deed for what seemed like the 100th time. The wording hadn't changed. The ink remained faded but legible. Boone reclined. "They are panicking. They constructed $1 million project on land they didn't own. You possess every advantage." That night, West Haven's president telephoned directly. Elijah didn't recognize the voice. He had never communicated with the man previously, but he detected the strain. "Mr. Jackson, I believe it is time we consider a resolution. We are keen to resolve this matter swiftly and discreetly. The current media coverage is not beneficial to anyone involved. We are ready to provide you with appropriate compensation for the land's assessed value, alongside a goodwill premium." Elijah didn't react with laughter, though it was evident he was restraining himself. "You're suggesting a payment equivalent to the land's previous worth, prior to the construction of the luxury neighborhood? That's a significant offer. It feels like an offensive proposition." Elijah stated, "You didn't simply relocate Earth. You sold property you didn't own. And now you wish to purchase it at a reduced price after you sold it for millions?" Silence followed, and Elijah could hear the breathing on the other end. Controlled. Stiff. "We could challenge this, Mr. Jackson." "You could." Elijah concurred. "But every home you constructed is already sold. Every buyer now has to question who owns their house. You wish to fight? That will be complicated, costly, and public." Another lengthy pause. "We'll be in touch." The line disconnected. 2 days later, the formal offer arrived via courier. The offer included $4.2 million for the land, a non-disclosure agreement, and a confirmation that Elijah would relinquish all claims to the structures built. Boone reacted with disbelief, nearly choking on his coffee. "I've seen offers disguised as bribes before, but this is exceptional," he remarked, pushing the proposal away. Elijah remained silent, his attention fixed on his neighbor's children, using a trampoline recently installed where his grandfather used to park his tractor. He was unwilling to have those children displaced. He was unwilling to have those families hurt. However, he also would not allow West Haven to escape with minimal consequences. Therefore, Elijah prepared a response. He refused the offer, requesting the complete assessed value for each sold home and unsold lot, reduced by a 10% discount for a comprehensive settlement. He pledged not to initiate eviction or repossession, but stipulated that West Haven must cover the legal expenses for each homeowner requiring a revised deed. He insisted on ownership of the community center, parks, and all remaining properties, requesting $61 million. There were no restrictions on speaking publicly, and a public apology was required. Jessica did not contact anyone. Her name was absent from any new official communications, though Elijah received reports. She was reportedly on leave. Some believed she had been dismissed, while others said she resigned. Regardless, the dispute had escalated to the boardroom. During the following 4 weeks, legal representatives from both parties met almost daily. Boone and Simone were seated opposite West Haven's corporate counsel, meticulously negotiating while Elijah largely observed the proceedings. They explored various approaches, proposing a reduced sum, hinting at arbitration, and even implying Elijah had knowingly permitted construction to proceed. Elijah remained composed, stating, "You built on my land. I didn't request it. I cautioned you against it. You disregarded me." Ultimately, West Haven conceded. The concluding agreement was finalized 6 weeks after the unsuccessful ribbon cutting. Elijah's total compensation amounted to $54 million, along with ownership of the community clubhouse, the undeveloped lots, and complete legal authority to oversee the correction of homeowner deeds, ensuring no families were displaced. The settlement was formally revealed at a public press conference. Elijah made brief remarks, expressing gratitude to his great-grandfather for his vision and noting that the past occasionally safeguards the future. He departed quietly, avoiding any media attention or interviews. A desire for tranquility remained. However, Elijah wasn't complete. He needed to ensure Otis's legacy represented something greater than retribution. The funds didn't alter Elijah, not in the anticipated manner. He continued to reside in the familiar house, the aged farmhouse where he'd spent his childhood, where his mother's cooking had permeated the walls with the aroma of fried okra, and where Otis's hammer marks were still evident in the doorframe. He didn't purchase a new truck, didn't relocate to a larger city, didn't install fencing around the land. He did, however, create something tangible, Several months following the agreement, Elijah utilized a segment of the funds, approximately $18 million, to purchase an additional 40-acre parcel of land situated 10 miles east outside the town of Tuskegee. This was land that had remained unclaimed for decades. He designated it the Otis Project. Working alongside local contractors, teachers, and community leaders, Elijah initiated the construction of what he envisioned as a unique neighborhood, designed not for financial gain, but for individuals who had previously been excluded from residing in areas like West Haven. The homes were offered at cost, with mortgage support integrated into the program, and applications were evaluated with empathy rather than relying solely on credit scores. Within the first year, 24 homes were finished, and each was occupied by a family. Individuals from all walks of life, teachers, single parents, factory workers, veterans, were welcomed, regardless of their circumstances. One morning, while standing on the first street of the Otis Project, Elijah observed a group of children playing tag on a front lawn. One little boy sparked a memory of his brother Curtis when they were 7 and too stubborn to wear shoes during summer. Boone arrived later that afternoon, holding a clipboard and a wide grin. "You know what they're calling you in town now," he said. Elijah raised an eyebrow. "What?" "The accidental mayor," Boone chuckled. "People say you were given millions, and instead of vanishing, you began constructing front porches." Elijah smiled. Otis didn't nurture hoarders. He cultivated workers. This wasn't merely words. Elijah utilized a portion of the remaining funds to establish a community center in Opelika, offering complimentary tutoring programs, job placement assistance, and a garden where seniors instructed children on cultivating tomatoes that weren't purchased from a grocery store. He also transformed the former West Haven Community Clubhouse, which he now legally owned, into a shared resource center, renaming it Jackson Hall. The tennis courts were made available for complimentary lessons to local young people. The pool offered dedicated swim times for seniors 3 mornings each week. While the Homeowners Association initially disapproved, the homeowners themselves greatly appreciated the changes. Initially, a small number of residents distanced themselves from Elijah, fearing he would seize their homes and viewing him as an adversary. Eventually, they understood that he didn't intend to dismantle what they had established. He simply desired recognition for the work his family had previously undertaken. Now, many approached him directly, seeking information about repairs, suggestions for local services, or guidance on cultivating vegetables in Alabama's challenging red clay. He consistently offered assistance to everyone. "I ain't trying to be a hero," he told a vet, a single mom, and one of the new homeowners. "I simply believe land should never be taken without acknowledging those who labored upon it previously." Yvette nodded. "Well, my son considers you a kind of superhero," Elijah chuckled. "Have you ever seen me attempt to change a flat tire?" He's likely to reconsider quickly. With the commencement of the second year of the Otis Project, Elijah made a final visit to the county archives. This building, where he initially retrieved the original deed, now displayed a framed photograph of Otis Jackson. Below the photo was a plaque that read, "In honor of the man who protected his land so his descendants could protect their community." Elijah stood silently for a moment, then reached into his pocket. He removed a small object wrapped in cloth, Otis's old railroad watch. He carefully set it on the glass counter close to the display. "I always detest being late," Elijah murmured. The sky outside had shifted to that gentle golden hue just prior to sunset, the very shade Otis would often appreciate following a lengthy day in the fields. Elijah smiled, not the smile of a victor, but the smile of one who had fulfilled an obligation. For ultimately, the clause wasn't simply about preventing thieves, it was about ensuring no one overlooked those who preceded them. And now, the land was speaking once more, its voice stronger than the sound of the bulldozers. If this narrative resonated with you, please consider subscribing. More stories such as this, authentic, unfiltered, and grounded in truth, are forthcoming.